we've been doing practicums here for a long time, so we've got 10 or 12 years worth of experience doing them. They're very interesting, and they can both be a lot of fun or just a total aggravation. And so you've got to kind of decide where you're going to end up with that. But the basic idea is we're asking you to solve a problem of some kind, okay? And the ones that we love are real problems that you're really trying to fix, but sometimes you can't come up with something that dramatic, and so we'll go with whatever you're willing to do. And the basic idea is to have a testable hypothesis, okay? And so it's supposed to be research, and you're supposed to have a hypothesis that you've generated that interests you, and then you're going to test it somehow. And these can be very widely varying. They can be anything from a stability study with Dr. Peacock to DUE at a hospital to a survey of patients in a retirement facility. It can be as broad as that, but the idea is to have a testable hypothesis. And once you have that hypothesis, we want you to figure out a way to test it. And so that part of that, is it testable? How are you going to do that? And if you're doing stability studies, that's easy. You know, it's either stable or not stable. But if you're doing a survey, that becomes a little harder because people sort of lose track of what was their original idea and how is their survey going to test that. And if you have that bent, we have a number of folks who really do know how to do that. Dr. Marsh, some of the clinical faculty, and I can help you with that to make sure you have a testable hypothesis. We have a one-page thing where you do your writing. Okay, and the idea would be you've developed an idea, you've done some research on it, you've looked at what the literature looks like, and then you're going to make this proposal that's basically one page. And so if you've got a good idea and you're excited about it, you can usually write that up in a day. You know, it's not hard. And you would submit that to your faculty advisor, and I'll talk to you a little bit about who that advisor would be. For a lot of the projects, you might be working with people, okay? And so you're asking a question about people. When you do that, you've got to have IRB approval, okay? And that can be a thorn. It doesn't have to be. Where it becomes a problem is if you're kind of a last-minute person and you send it right at the deadline, then it can be an issue. But for most of the projects end up in what we call an exempt category, which means you're not really doing anything that's going to hurt anybody, and so it's not a big deal. And normally the IRB can turn those around. We can do them in a day, but they ask for 2 weeks to do them. So you need to kind of think ahead how you would do that. It is important to do the paperwork well. Most often, student proposals are rejected for lack of clarity. The person reviewing it doesn't know what you're trying to do. And so it's really a good idea to work with your faculty advisor on how to present your information in a way that someone reviewing it would get the point and pass it through really quickly. Obviously, grammar and spelling errors are a problem. Okay? And then once you have that, you can begin your project. And it usually involves collecting data in some way. And then you're going to analyze the data, and there are lots of folks around who can help you with statistics. That's kind of the idea of testing. And then you're going to write up a very brief abstract, and then at the end of the semester, depending on whether you're December or May, you present that in poster format. Okay, so those are the steps. Every student does it every year. And in all the years I've been involved, I think we've had 2 students who didn't pass, and both of those didn't present it. Okay, so basically, if you put in the time, you'll get it done, and there's no issue. Okay, it is a credit, and so if you bail on it, you don't get the credit, you don't graduate. You know, that's kind of sad, but like I said, that would be a self-inflicted wound. Okay, and so it's a fairly straightforward process. if you really want to kind of dig in a little bit, on the website under courses, if you go down to P4, it's listed and it's SPAR 825, but I have to warn you that we're simplifying it. That's the format that we've had for years, and it has like points and all. We're not going to do that. Basically, what you need to do is turn things in by deadlines, and I'll talk to you about that. Once you do your presentation, we have 2 or 3 faculty members that come around and talk to you, and you explain what you did, and they submit a score to me, and then based on that score, we give you a grade. Now, if you missed all the deadlines, you'll lose some points, that kind of thing. But basically, the deadlines are not that hard, and I will give you slack if you talk to me about it. And as you'll see later, even if your project totally collapses, the nursing home closes and you get no data, if you still come, put up your poster and stand there and tell people what happened, you'll pass, okay? But, you gotta think about it. So if in the back of your mind you're thinking, okay, well, I'm gonna do something really simple. I'll stand out in front of CBS and ask the first 10 people that come in some survey questions. Well, you can kind of do that, but remember this, you're going to have to present that to your advisor, and then you're going to have to present it to your classmates and the faculty, and that's really not the impression you want to create. You don't want to sort of your last thing you do here to be show everybody you're slack off and can't get your work done, okay? And so we don't really worry about that, and to be honest with you, the faculty that come around, sort of the worst grade they give is like 70%, okay? And so I'm trying to get you to relax about it, even though I want you to do a good job, okay? Yeah, but what I'm saying is that your life doesn't depend on this. We just would like you to do it, there is a credit involved, and if you pick the right kind of project, it can really be fun. Okay, so that's the flow of the work. Okay, and here are some other issues that I think you may be interested in. We divide the class up between spring and fall. And the way we do that is in June, I ask you what you want, okay? And I get all your emails in, and then I try to divide you. And it usually works out that it's like 60-40. Okay, and that's not what everybody wanted, but what I do then is I take the excess to make it even, and I randomly divide it between the two. And so, what are the odds you'll get what you want? They're very high. They're very high. I also allow you to switch with a willing person. So, if you get what you don't want and somebody else doesn't have what they want, we can switch. But obviously, it would be better not to do that. Okay, and so I will try to accommodate your request. We also, on the presentation day, we have a quarter of the group in the morning and the other quarter of that half in the afternoon. And so I will also ask you closer to the presentation day which you would prefer. And again, I'll try to work with that to give you the right timing on that for you. A number of our students do presentations at the mid-year. You might want to do that if you're really thinking about a residency or a fellowship or something like that. And this is totally compatible with it. We had a large number of students this year that presented at the mid-year in December, and about half of them did the December practicum, about half did the May practicum. And so it doesn't generally make any difference when you do your practicum relative to when you do your mid-year presentation. That's really not a big deal, but again, we'll try to work with you to get something on that. Okay? If you do a mid-year poster, those have a format. They have a large printed format, and you put them up like on a bulletin board. You can use that as your practicum poster. If you don't do that, then we ask you to put it on a 3-sided cardboard, kind of standard deal. But if you have a mid-year printed poster, what we do is we either put them on the wall or put them on the window, and you just do exactly the same thing. The only difference is you've got to turn in hard documents too. So let's say you wanted to go to the mid-year, you turn in an abstract to the mid-year, a bunch of people look at it, they like it, you get invited to come and present it, okay? You do that by giving them an abstract. And so all you have to do is take that abstract and put it into our paperwork, and that works perfectly. Okay, and we want you to do that. In other words, bonus to you if you go to the mid-year with whatever you've done. Okay, and we've had some really, really good ones. Okay, and then lastly, on this slide, again, a failed study doesn't mean a failed practicum. And I have students right now that are going to be presenting in, a week and a half, that have almost nothing. But they're working really hard and they're going to get it in. And, usually it looks pretty darn good. So again, a lot of the issue, it can be planning, but there can be things that you just have no control over. And to be honest with you, that's something to think about in terms of both how you work, how an advisor would work, and whether just how the mechanics of this thing are going to fit together. And I'll show you the time frames here in just a minute. Who can be your advisor? It can be really anybody. If it's one of our faculty members here on campus, no big deal, that's perfect. Could it be a preceptor in wherever you're going? Even if it's like, say you're going on that world cruise deal. Could be one of those people. Okay? And then other people, I will listen to any reasonable plan. Okay? Now, not the problem, but the issue with non-School of Pharmacy faculty is they're not real familiar with our procedures. And so if you pick someone who's not regular faculty here, I need to have you take responsibility for following the rules and turning things in on time. And that's really the only condition. It really does help to have an advisor that sort of understands this kind of thing. Because you do have to follow the rules, you've got to have an abstract, you've got to meet the deadlines. And so our faculty get that, and they know what you need to do, and they might even push you a little if you need a push. Okay? Somebody out somewhere else may not at all. So you kind of need to think that through. Some of the faculty are last-minute folks, and so if you're a last-minute person, you might want to find somebody like that. Other people are really detailed and do it ahead of time. You might try to look for a faculty person that operates in that mode too, if that's more comfortable for you. Now, we have 40 faculty here in the School of Pharmacy. And what we try to do is we try to limit it to 2 or 3 students per faculty per time period. So in other words, we can't have 20 people with Dr. Combest. That just won't work. And so we need for you to kind of spread out a little bit. We're not going to, obviously if you've been working on something for 2 years, we could sort of convert that into a practicum project. That would work. And the person you've been working with, they could be your advisor. But we won't be actually picking the advisors for another couple of weeks, okay? And what they need to think about is what to do if they have 10 requests, okay? I also don't keep a running tally of who those folks are. And so if you send me an email and say, who doesn't have an advisee, I actually don't know. Okay, now you can, if you want to organize that yourself, you're welcome to do that. But basically, what you want to do is think of somebody that you would like to work with that has interests that are sort of compatible with your interests. And that's really the way it works. And then you need to find a project that really interests you. And most of our advisors want you to come to them with some idea. Now, it doesn't have to be the final idea, but it's got to be, you don't walk in and sit down and say, tell me what to do. Most advisors don't want that. They would want somebody who wants to engage in something they're doing. Now, you may not have a hard idea, but you could have some general areas that would interest you. Okay? And again, these don't have to be, New England Journal quality things. We're talking about something that's feasible within your frame of operations. And that varies really widely. Okay, so any questions about advisors? It can really be anybody. If they're not our faculty, you've got to talk to me about it. So we can kind of figure out how much help you'll need with that. Yes?
I know there are some professors who you may have, who we may have on rotations, can have their own projects, and they have also may also ask if you will do one of their small projects for their big project or something like that. Do you find that those are more successful than ones that students do on their own?
That's a good question. And what she's saying basically is, if you find a good preceptor, they have some good ideas, work with them. That does work. The only downside to that is faculty in their own projects tend to have bigger scope. And so like we had a student a year or two ago who wanted to look at the incidence of colitis across various antibiotic groups. And he ended up with, I don't know, like 1,000 patients. And it turned into this massive project that he barely got it done in time for the mid-year. And it totally stressed him out. And he regretted doing it, even though it was interesting. And so the only downside is that faculty tend to see a little bit bigger scope, although our faculty have been doing these for a long time, and that's totally okay with me. Yeah. And, you know, like I said, they probably would want you to have an idea, and some of them, the minute you flinch and don't have an idea, they'll have one for you. And that can be good. It's just whether or not you want to sign on to the whatever it is. And sort of one of the basic rules here is always think about who's involved. Because if it's something like, I work with this physician and he's going to do this, or she's going to do this, that should be a red flag for you, because that means it doesn't get done unless that person does it. And what you really want to do is have a project where it depends on you, because then you have some control over it and whether it gets done or doesn't get done. Okay? Okay, so no more questions on who? This is the schedule that we currently have. We haven't finished it yet. I'll have a new schedule for you somewhere right around finals time. And basically the way it works is the first thing we do is pick an advisor. Okay? And so if you end up in the May group, you don't have to pick an advisor until later. Okay? And then and you're allowed to switch. All you have to do is tell them, and the advisor has to agree to. Okay, be professional about that. You have to write up the proposal, and you can see we want to see this by about mid-August, and it'll be roughly the same time frame. So these aren't the actual dates; these are this year's dates. This coming year will be right in the same ballpark. And so what you'll do is you give the proposal to your advisor, they approve it, and then at some point it comes to me, and that's really kind of a formality, because I'm going to let you do pretty much whatever you want to do. I can read them, but I'm not going to critique it from that standpoint. If you're involving human subjects in some way, then you have to have IRB approval. The mid-October would be the very latest you would possibly want to do that. Okay, so if you've got a good idea in August, I would send the IRB in August, as long as you can all understand. And then once you've done it, we need to have an abstract, and the abstract describes what you do. And if you're not done with your study, that's okay. You just give me an abstract for what you've done before the deadline. Okay, and so let's say you're working with Dr. Smith, and you're doing something related to oncology, and you're starting to gather patients, but the deadline's coming. You just keep working on your thing, but you send me a little abstract that tells me what you're doing and how you're doing it, and you leave the results part blank. Okay, and so if you do that, you vet it. And then the final thing, the draft of the poster, we don't really worry about that. We just assume that when the date comes, you're going to be there and present it. And we have had some people that morning trying to, finish out a couple things, and that happens sometimes. But the idea would be that you would stand in front of the poster over this period of about 2 hours. And when the evaluator comes by, you'll be able to give about a 3 to 5 minute explanation of what you've done, and maybe answer a question or And so the trick with that is not, don't put things on you don't understand or learn about them, okay? And it's interesting because we have some students that do very technical things, and the fact that they come by don't really understand what they're doing. And so you just have to be able, in case they do understand what you're doing. And most of them, they tend to do it real low key. They may ask you a hard question, but they'll do it nicely. And so most students tell us, you know, it was really hectic, but it ended up being fun. And they don't really struggle with explaining what they've done. Okay, and so we have half that group that'll present in December, part of that in the morning, part of that in the afternoon. I collect all that stuff and come up with a grade for you, and again, they're all typically very good. And then we start the cycle over again in May. And generally speaking, it's a mistake if you're a May person to really wait till then. You know, it's a good idea to kind of get things rolling, particularly if you have an IRB thing that has to go in, and try to get it rolling ahead of time. Last year, I had a student who had pretty much everything done in August, and it was a decent project. And so that's entirely feasible depending on the type of thing you want to do. And so the idea is to pick the scope of something that's not overwhelming and something that you'll be able to do. Okay, and so the final presentation days sort of go like this. They're typically the Monday of finals week. And so if you're trying to project when that would be Monday of finals week. Okay, and again, I know people develop an anxiety about this, but it really goes very smoothly, and 95% of the projects are really good, people are interested in them, and so it ends up being a fairly positive experience. You'll find a couple of people who wouldn't agree with that, but that's just the way it is. Okay, questions? You can shoot me an email anytime, and I'll try and answer it for you.
Does anybody ever try to get these published?
Sure, and a number of them, not from this year, but from the year before, I would say there were 4 or 5 of them that were of the quality, and I think probably 3 of those ended up in journals. Yeah. And again, it depends on where you see your career track leading, but that's really a leg up for most people. If you go into academic pharmacy, absolutely. At many hospitals, it also. Yes.
In terms of like the broadness of these, if you're going to do subject mapping, is it okay to do like a case study, or do you have to have like a minimum number?
Okay, yeah, that's a great question. Case studies can be really interesting, but you still need a testable hypothesis, and so sometimes that's hard to do. I can think of ways to do that. For example, you might, let's say you had a patient who had a drug reaction. Let's say you put them on a new antibiotic, and 7 days later they got a whole body rash. Okay, you look at the literature, oh, that's happened to some people. And so you then you could do something like look at the statistics of that. How does that work? And there's some ways to play with it where you would have a hypothesis that you could test. We had a student this year who went on that global initiative, and he went to the country he came from, and he gathered all this information, but he forgot about the testable hypothesis part. And I was kind of leaning towards letting him slide on it, but the faculty reviewers wanted to see something. And so what I suggested to him is, why don't you get World Health Organization data on healthcare in this country and compare it to what you saw. And so that's what he's doing right now. And so we can kind of resurrect it. And again, maybe a bigger issue would be, can you really engage in it? And for example, a couple of years ago, we did have a student who broke the rules and developed a brochure to give to people waiting to get their meds in the pharmacy that explained what pharmacists do. And that's not what you're supposed to do. But the brochure was beautiful. And the faculty, when they saw it, they loved it, and she got away with it. And it did break the rules, but boy, it was good. And so, again, this isn't to torture you, it's to have you do something, and so she certainly passed, absolutely. Yeah, and so I'm not encouraging you to do that, I'm just saying that lower your level of apprehension and think about what to do and turn it into a positive experience rather than a negative. Yes?
Is there any way to see what other students have done in the past?
How could we do that? I have files with their abstracts, thousands of them. Let me think about that. We used to put the winners out in the hallway because we pick out 5 and 5 from December. And then at graduation, Dr. Kirkpatrick reads your name and the title of your project, which is really funny because it's hard to read. And, being in front of everybody, you're nervous, and so you get all kinds of stuff, but you get recognized in front of your family and others that you had a very good project. I'll see if I can dig up some of those. Yeah, I'll say something on it, then you can think about this. Dr. Peacock all the time does stability studies, and I don't know if any of you are in here who do that, but there's already some students who work with her in doing that. And it's really interesting if you're a pharmaceutics person. It's really boring if you're more interested in something else. And the nice thing about it is she's fun to work with. She's really smart. You learn a whole bunch of stuff, and you learn a kind of a valuable skill. It's just the excitement level is kind of low on that. We have had students who work with the faculty at WingMed who come up with really good things. A number of patients over a 3-month period that experience a particular drug interaction. And I'm talking about that. Use of certain antibiotics as opposed to other antibiotics, that can be really interesting. People in community pharmacy, all kinds of interesting topics. Things like having a survey with patients and asking them questions about what a pharmacist does. And then having them read a brochure and ask them to do it. So they change, that's the testament part. There have been community surveys that deal with preferences for medication. There have been projects where they went to a mall and had people taste some different things and make some judgments about compounded medications based on how they're flavored. One that I saw students do 35 years ago was go to the mall and ask people at random to measure a tablespoon of a medication and leave them a real tablespoon, a syringe, different things, and then see how close you get to it. And you find that people are absolutely terrible. This is history. 40 years ago, my sister-in-law called at about 4 in the morning. Her little boy was febrile and he's not getting better after Tylenol. What do? And so being a pharmacist, I said, well, how much did you give it? And she said, we gave him 1 drop, just like it says. And I said, did you say drop? And she said, yeah. And she picked up the bottle and it was drop per full. And that made no difference to her. She thought that was a drop and gave him a drop. And so people don't know about that kind of stuff. How do you teach them about that? We had another one where they talked to people, what do you do if you miss your dose? And that's very interesting because a lot of people don't know that. And you could turn that into an interesting thing. And so I hope you can see, we've had students do genomic things. We have some right now that are doing sequencing on a weird gene, and it's not going nowhere, by the way. And we're not going to have a lot to present other than this is what I was trying to do. But guess what, that works, And so, and again, you can ask yourself, do I like laboratory, do I like clinical, do I like community, there's all those kinds of things that can be a really good project.
I was just wondering if you were able to come to the shared presentation.
Oh, absolutely. It'll be May 7th, to morning and afternoon, and there's lots of time when nobody's around, but you can come by and talk to students and see what they've done, and you'll see it again. So yes, please do. Okay, any other questions? Okay, like I said, you'll be getting emails to me, or from me, and I really like you to respond to my email with your answer because it lumps them all together, and I won't lose it that way. Okay?